Our New Testament lesson today comes from the book of Luke, chapter 12, verses 6 through 7. You can find that in your Pew Bible if you want to follow along on page 1617. And that's Luke chapter 12, verse 6 through 7, 6 and 7, page 1617. Are not 5 sparrows sold for 2 pennies? Yet not one of them is forgotten by God. Indeed, the very hairs of your head are all numbered. Don't be afraid. You are worth more than many sparrows. This is the word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
Okay, I need you to go with me on this and try to visualize what I'm going to describe. This would be the perfect sermon. We have a great big screen up here, so I can show it to you rather than just talk about it. Now you walk outside on a really dark night and you look up. Hopefully you're away from the normal light pollution that most of us have to deal with these days. But on a clear night, you can see thousands of stars. Those stars are all in this little subdivision that we call the Milky Way galaxy. Scientists tell us the Milky Way is 100,000 light years across. Does that help anybody get a perspective of just how big that is? Me neither. So let's break it down a little bit. Well, light travels at 186,000 miles per second. So if we do the arithmetic, let's see, there's 60 seconds in a minute. Carry the 4. 5.88 trillion miles in a year. It's 1 light year. The galaxy that we live in, the Milky Way, is 100,000 times 5.88 trillion. And I don't even know what that is. That's how far it is across our galaxy. Now, scientists tell us the Milky Way galaxy contains billions of stars. Our sun is just one of them. It's not even the big one. There's so many stars, in fact, that if we started counting them at the rate of 1 per second, 1, 2, 3, 4, it would take us 2,500 years to count just the stars in the Milky Way galaxy. Scientists also say there are hundreds of billions of other galaxies in the known universe. Further, think about the children's message and how hard it would be to pinpoint the exact location of the town of Aberdeen on a globe that size. Now think about this, thinking about the Milky Way galaxy again. But just think of our sun and its planets, our solar system. It would be like placing a quarter on the ground in the area the size of North America and trying to find that quarter. Now, I'm not trying to make anybody feel small or insignificant in the scheme of things, because y'all are. But that's okay, because God knows each and every one of us by name. God can come into this church and call every one of us by name. He could show up at Raymond Stadium this afternoon during a football game and name every person in every seat in that stadium. We're that important to God. The Old Testament scripture reading today came from Psalm 139. Now, if you read just a little bit further, it says that he knew each of one of us before we were even born. He's numbered every hair on my head. Now, these days, you don't have to quite count quite so high. But just the same, he knows every one of them. And God cares about us. He wants what's best for us. He listens to our prayers. He gives gifts to us that we can use. He expects us to use those gifts. And you know what? Even the smallest things we do or don't do can have an impact on the world around us. I'm sure most of you have heard about the grand experiment that involved reintroducing wolves to Yellowstone National Park. It got kicked off in 1995 when they reintroduced 14 wolves. They were Canadian wolves into the park. And what has happened, it's just incredible. Of course, wolves kill a variety of animals, but they also give life to others. They had been eradicated from Yellowstone and were non-existent in the park for over 70 years. During that time, the elk and the deer had nothing to hunt them. So their numbers built up and built up and built up even more. In certain areas, they had reduced the vegetation to almost nothing. They just grazed it away. Of course, when the wolves arrived, they killed some of the elk. That's what wolves do. But they also changed the behavior of the rest of the elk. The elk began avoiding certain areas of the park where they could maybe be trapped by the wolves. They stayed away from the canyons and down in some of the valleys. Almost immediately, those areas started to regenerate. Vegetation started to grow back. They tell us that in some areas, the height of the trees quintupled in just 6 years. Bare valley sides became forests. Forests of aspen and willow and cottonwood. Because the trees grew back, lots of birds came back. Plentiful trees caused the beavers to move back in. The dams built by the beavers created new habitat for ducks and otters, muskrats, fish, reptiles. The wolves also killed some of the coyotes. Because of that, the number of rabbits and mice has started to multiply. So, more hawks, weasels, badgers, and foxes came back in. Ravens and bald eagles came down to feed on carrion left by the wolves. Bears started to multiply because of the berries on the trees and the shrubs. But something even more incredible happened. The rivers changed. Because the regenerating vegetation and forests stabilized the riverbanks weren't collapsing as much anymore. The rivers began to meander less. More pools formed. There were more riffle sections, rapids. All of this was good for other wildlife. Because the elk were driven out of some of the areas, there's less soil erosion in those areas. This was astounding. The wolves not only changed the wildlife that's in the area, they also changed the physical geography of the Park. Now, Yellowstone National Park is almost 3,500 square miles in area. They tell us that since 2009, the population of wolves in the park has fluctuated between about 83 and 108 wolves. Doesn't really seem like a lot of wolves to me in that big an area. But think of the impact that they've had. Little things can sometimes have great big effects. What does that have to do with us? One of my professors, Dr. Forshee, tells a story of one of her friends. Several years ago, Kimberly felt a nudge to learn about human trafficking. It scared her a little bit, so she chose to just kind of ignore it. But that feeling kept coming back. Finally, she offered just a small prayer and told God she would be open to studying about it and listening about it. In a few months, articles started coming her way. These articles and her continued openness led to more prayer. More connections were made. Kimberly read about groups like International Justice Mission, who research, investigate, and often rescue people who've been kidnapped and fallen victims to human trafficking. Kimberly started writing about the subject in her blog. Consequently, she's communicated this concern and related stories to hundreds, maybe even thousands of people. Dr. Forshee says she's told hundreds of her students about this story. How many of those students have shared the story? I just did. Maybe another 50 people. We may never know the full impact of that one small prayer offered by Kimberly. Likewise, we will never know the results of some of our own small actions and prayers. Think about those Bible school teachers you had when you were a kid. That little thing they did of volunteering to teach made a difference in your life in some way. They helped you build your foundation of faith. I said it was a little thing because that's what a lot of those teachers will say if you ask them about their efforts. But it wasn't a little thing. Some of you followed in their footsteps. You taught Sunday school, VBS, maybe Bible studies. How much impact are you having? You may never know. But I can assure you, it can have an exponential effect on the people around you. Have you ever felt that boulder in your shoe? The one that made your foot feel so uncomfortable? And you finally take your shoe off, you shake it out, there's nothing there but a little pebble, maybe just a little grain. But even though it was so small, it caused you to change the way you walked. In the same way, little words you say, acts that you do, can sometimes help people to change their walk. And isn't that what we're supposed to do? When you casually talk about what you learned in Bible school or heard in a sermon, it may seem a small thing to you, but it may start someone thinking about how they're living their life and how it compares to yours. Your example, your Christian walk, may not seem like such a big thing to you. It may seem that it's just a little thing to do it, but it really counts in God's kingdom. Just like the boy with the 5 fishes and 2 barley loaves. God magnifies the small things we do to glorify his kingdom. As I mentioned earlier, we are but tiny specks in God's creation. But he cares about us. He knows us. He listens to us. He watches everything we do. He can take our smallest actions, our shortest prayers, and mag them into incredibly big things. And we don't want to forget about our talents here either. We've discussed this before. Everyone is important to God. You may think your particular talent is a little thing, not much in the grand scheme of things, but think seriously about this. What would happen if your talent disappeared today? Now, before you say, not much, let's think about that. The example you set isn't just in the world, in this community, it's also in this church. When you use your talent, no matter how small, it means a lot to others. I'm sure we've all heard the philosophical question that goes something like, what happens on the other side of the world when a butterfly flaps its wings? After all, doesn't any action have a cause and effect? That might be a tough one to really get excited about, but be assured, even though we are but a speck in all of God's creation, everything we do, everything we say, every action we take, no matter how small, can have incredible effects on the people, and as we saw with the wolves, sometimes even the physical geography around us. Just keep on keeping on. Keep on doing those little things and let God magnify them into much greater things. Let us pray. Father, you've told us how important we are to you. You've shown us how important we are to you. Please deliver your blessings and use even the smallest things that we do in our daily lives to be magnified and multiplied by you for your glory. Amen. Our next hymn is number 557. Pass it on.